Peter, one of the interesting things about this election, Tony Howard was referring to it just there, is whether this is an anti-Tory vote. The evidence for that would be if people have been voting across the country not only to get Labour in or to get seats for the Liberal Democrats, but simply to get the Tories out and using their vote, as Paddy Ashdown said, effectively to do that. Has that been happening on a big scale?
Oh, never in a British general election have we seen tactical voting on this scale, and the results have been quite spectacular. Just look on the left-hand side here about how the opposition challenge in what are Conservative Labour seats, how effective it's been. Now, these are Conservative seats with Labour on the attack in those seats. The Labour share of the vote zooming up to 13%, more than it was before. The Liberal Democrat vote nationally down 1%, down nearly 3% in those seats. So, if you like, Liberal Democrat supporters appearing to support Labour to beat the Tory in those seats. In the Conservative Liberal Democrat seats, the ones that are targets for the Liberal Democrats, up goes the Liberal Democrat vote. Not a great deal, but it goes up, and the Labour vote only goes up by 7%, way below its national performance. Now, the way to illustrate this is, needless to say, on our swingometer. Now, here's the swingometer. Here are the blue Conservative seats that turn red for a swing to Labour, and here are the red Labour seats that would turn blue if there were a swing to the Conservatives. Now, the average national swing right over the whole country is enough to knock out 50, 60, 100 of these Conservative MPs here. Fine, 10.5% swing there. But let me just bring on the actual results in the seats that we have so far. And watch what happens beyond the national swing up here in the seats that it takes a bigger swing to get than the ones below it. Look at that. Way above the national swing, there's the pendulum on 10.5% there, well above the national swing, seats like Finchley here, and I don't even see it, way up here, I can hardly reach it, is Harrogate. There's Norman Lamont, a huge tactical vote there in Harrogate, has beaten Norman Lamont in a very safe Conservative seat. Swing there was something like 20%, and extraordinary things are happening. So what you have here is a picture of the national swing of some 10.5%, national swing of some 10.5%, being overcome dramatically in specific seats beyond that national swing. And here it is again. If there were a national swing of 10.5% and that were happening in all the seats, we'd see a Labour majority of around 100. But because they're succeeding in maximising their vote against the sitting Tory, so the swing actually is something like 13% and the Labour majority is way up here nearer 200. David.
Peter, I suppose the Tories should have been forewarned, because that's exactly what's been happening in local government, isn't it, for the past 4 years? The Tories, anything to get the Tories out has been the cry of voters in local government.
Oh, it's worked in local government. I mean, I think the stunning thing about this election is the way people have suddenly become so aware of the potential of tactical voting. I mean, most people, I think, couldn't really believe it would happen on this scale. But here it has happened. It's a dramatic vindication of those who said it could happen nationally at general elections if only we can persuade people to do it, and it's happened.
But it suggests perhaps more than just understanding how it works, which is fairly straightforward if you're in any one of the... I mean, it sounds complicated when you call it tactical voting, but if you're actually sitting in a seat and you can see either the Liberal Democrats or Labour is in second place, it's fairly obvious what you can do. I mean, what it suggests is a ferocity of reaction against the Tories that must be quite alarming for them.
Indeed it does. Absolutely right.
Let's just have a look at the state of the parties now, just after 10 o'clock. And this is how things stand with 629 results in. We've got 30 still to come. 417 for Labour, up 145. 160 for the Conservatives, down 174. The Liberal Democrats on 41, up 25. National parties up 3, others on 1. So that's the state of things. We've got 3 important constituencies still counting, and we'll just go around them and talk to the reporters who are there to see how things are going and what's likely to happen. Denise Mahoney, first of all, good morning in St Ives. Very nice to be down in the West Country today. Lucky old you. What's happening down there?
Southwesterly tip. Well, as Peter was saying, the ferocity of the anti-Tory vote has got them reeling here in St Ives. They've just noticed what's happened last night and they're really scared. This is a marginal seat. It's only a 1,600 majority. There's a new Tory candidate standing. The Lib Dems have had a fierce campaign here, and there may have been tactical voting on behalf of the Labour Party. Of course, Europe is very important down in this neck of the woods because they've got Newlyn, the big fishing port. Fishing has been a real topic on the doorsteps here. And indeed, the referendum party candidate himself is a fisherman. So the Tory party have had their work cut out for them here. The Liberal Democrats are playing it cautious. They think they've got a win, but they won't tell me how big it is. Some of them are even saying, well, we've got to wait for the postal votes to come in. Indeed, a high proportion of elderly people living here who will vote by post. And of course, the Isles of Scilly votes. They've just arrived accidentally behind me, and they're being counted there now. So we don't know what the score is yet, but I think it'll go to the Liberal Democrats here, to the candidate Andrew George.
Denise Mahoney, thank you very much. And Tim Hirsch in Brecon and Radnor. Tim, good morning.
Good morning. Well, counting is at a relatively early stage here. It's been going on just over an hour, but they're still at the verification process. They haven't actually started counting the votes yet. But what will be determined here is whether there is a complete Tory wipeout in Wales, because this was a Conservative-held seat, Brecon and Radnor, but it was held by just 130 votes by the former Welsh Office Minister, Jonathan Evans. So in view of what's happened everywhere else, it would be quite remarkable if the Tories did not lose this. But it's far from clear who the gainer would be, because the Liberal Democrats were the nearest challengers last time, but Labour not that far behind, so it could be quite a tight battle between Labour and the Liberal Democrats here.
Right, thank you very much, Tim Hirsch. We'll be hearing from Brecon and Radnor later. It is incidentally where Peter Mandelson cut his teeth as a candidate. And now Berwick-upon-Tweed, and Robert Orchard is there.
Good morning, David. Well, we're in the picturesque market town of Alnwick, where the count is going on, and the Liberal Democrats are confident that their record tally of seats is going to be increased when Alan Beef, their deputy leader, holds this seat quite comfortably when the declaration, the count going on in the school behind me, is we expected the declaration outside in about an hour's time. They're confident that he'll hold that seat. The tactical voting that Peter Snow was talking about has been giving Alan Beef majorities here with Labour support for some time. He's expecting the Labour vote to go up, but it looks as if the Tories may be pushed into third place. Ironically, they were quite upbeat about winning this seat at one point. The Tory candidate Nick Herbert was telling me that in the Labour landslide of 1945, Berwick-on-Tweed was one of the 2 seats that actually went to the Tories, and there have been a lot of cabinet ministers here helping his campaign. He's not looking so happy this morning. Incidentally, Alan Beef won this seat in the by-election in 1973 after Lord Lambton, the Tory, had to resign after a sex scandal. His son Ned Lambton is standing here for the referendum party, but we're not expecting any political earthquakes.
Thank you very much indeed. I said that Peter Mandelson stood as a candidate in Brecon and Radnor. He didn't. He organised the campaign in the by-election in Brecon and Radnor for Labour, and very much impressed Neil Kinnock as a result, and that's how he had his first step up in politics. Well, now, Huw Edwards is in Downing Street and has some guests with him who are going to comment on the results overnight. Huw?
David, just to update you on a few logistical details so that we all know where we're going this morning. Mr. Major knows where he's going. Of course, he's going to the Palace. The time slightly changing, probably leaving here at about 11:10, and I wouldn't be at all surprised, David, if he stopped on the doorstep and said a few words before he left. I think we can be fairly certain of that. Another little tidbit, may be significant, may not be. Lord McNally, who was, of course, Mr. Callaghan, the last Labour Prime Minister, Special Advisor here in Downing Street. He's now Paddy Ashdown, Special Advisor. He was meant to be with us right now. He's had to go off to an emergency meeting with Mr. Ashdown. Don't know what that's about. He'll come back to us later and tell us. In the meantime, I've got 3 distinguished guests with me, each of them with a special perspective on what is going on this morning. Sir Bernard Ingham, who was, for the best part of 11 years, Bernard, Mrs. Thatcher's Press Secretary here. Yep. Good morning.
Good morning.
To Lady Simons, good morning. For 8 years leading the Senior Civil Servants Association. And a very good morning to you, Peter. Professor Peter Hennessy, distinguished historian.
Good morning, Jim.
Bernard, what's going on in there at the moment?
Well, I think that there is a curious mixture simultaneously of great sadness and great excitement. John Major will be saying his farewells. I think there will be inevitably a great deal of affection in there for him after 6 years. But all the time that the civil servants are saying farewell, they will be gearing themselves up to clap Tony Blair in. As the tradition is, you clap the man out and you clap the new one in.
Will there be any big decisions taken, any last-minute decisions taken in his capacity as Prime Minister this morning?
I think unless somebody is about to invade Kuwait, I would doubt very much whether there are any great decisions left. I mean, I think the civil service has things very much under control, and barring untoward events such as that, I think they've got it all sewn up, including the manner of Mr. Major's departure.
Lady Simons, people perhaps at home don't quite realise to what extent the civil service at a senior level has contacts with an opposition, especially leading up to an election like this. It's certainly the case now. How important is that?
Oh, it's very important, and it's been over a particularly long period for this, the run-up to this election. It's been going on for over a year, where the shadow secretaries of state have been seeing the permanent secretaries in each department. So there's been a two-way exchange of information about how departments run, from the permanent secretaries to the shadow secretaries of state. And of course the shadow secretaries of state saying, well, you know, these are the sorts of policies that we're going to want briefing on when we come into power. So I think the civil service will be very well geared up for today. Secretaries of State, as they go in, maybe this afternoon, maybe over the weekend, will all be presented with first day briefing from their permanent secretaries, which will have been built up over quite a long period this time.
Peter, you are the chronicler of modern Britain, modern British politics. How will this departure be seen in the context of others?
I think, there will, as Bernard says, there'll be a great deal of affection for the Majors. They really have won the hearts through their decency and their kindness. But of course it will be remembered too, because it is one of those great moments in British political history. For the earth to move in this sense politically is an extraordinarily rare event. I mean, it's lucky if we'll see anything like this in our lifetime again. But having said that, what is always so impressive about these occasions is that Bernard said how beautifully choreographed it is. And if they've got the model of last time when Mrs. Thatcher arrived, it'll be worth watching for, because Mrs. Thatcher realised she was Prime Minister when, on the way out in the bomb-proof car, the soldiers saluted her. They didn't salute to her on the way in because she wasn't Prime Minister. And then Sir Kenneth Stowe, her private secretary, said, sit on this side of the car so that you get out on the pavement so you don't have to face this lot behind us until you're ready. Then he, Ken Stowe, ran rapidly down to the end of the street, round the back, in the garden entrance, which Bernard remembers, up to the back door, right through to the front of the corridor, ready for her to finish her well-rehearsed spontaneity to the cameras from St Francis of Assisi to applaud his way in.
I was too busy.
You were on holiday at the time.
I mean, I think Peter forgets that there are some of us in this company who do actually remember the great landslide of 146 majority in 1945 and 143 in 1983. I mean, there are some of us who have some experience of these matters.
I defer to you, Bernard. Of course, you were a lefty in 1945 and you were far from a lefty in 1983.
There are so many, particularly young people, who I think today is a fantastic day for them. And I mean, it is, after all, the greatest Labour victory ever. And we mustn't lose sight of that. And it's very interesting, of course, what the civil servants are going to do. But this is a tremendous day for lots of people, I think, in this country.
How difficult is it for civil servants, certainly at a senior level, who've worked with one party for 18 years, surely it's quite normal, perhaps, to expect them to have difficulty adjusting to a completely different philosophy?
No, I really don't think that's true. I mean, I know that's often said, and I see Bernard's agreeing with what I'm saying. That is not so. The civil service is brought up in the tradition of political neutrality. Their job is to support the government of the day that has been elected by the people. They did that loyally for the Conservative Party. They will do it loyally now that Labour's in power.
Quick final word to you and Peter.
I've moved from Labour to Conservative, from Conservative to Labour, from Labour to Conservative. I moved from Tony Benn to Margaret Thatcher. You're a pro. You cope with what you've got.
Peter?
They weren't politicised. Some say dear old Bernard was politicised, but I'm a charitable man. But when you look at senior civil servants, Bernard, when they get to your age, or my age even, it's very hard to get them to believe in anything but a party manifesto. Wouldn't you agree?
Cynicism can take hold.
Well, have to get rid of cynicism.
Whereupon, Peter Hennessy, Liz Simons, Bernard Ingham, thank you very much indeed, and it's back to you, David.
Thanks, Huw. Now, Sue Cameron is with the Tory candidate, the Secretary of State for Wales still, William Hague, in Richmond, Yorkshire. Sue.
Yes, well, I have William Hague with me, who is already, as he awaits the result of his own count, being spoken of as a very strong contender for the Tory leadership. William Hague, surely it must be a matter of when, not if, Mr. Major's going to go.
Well, not necessarily. I think that's entirely up to Mr. Major. I support him as leader of the Conservative Party. I've just spent weeks campaigning to try to keep him as Prime Minister of this country. So I'm obviously in favour of him staying as leader of the Conservative Party if he wishes to do so.
But surely, in the light of such a massive landslide for Labour, there can be not much prospect of him staying on for very long.
Well, he will no doubt wish to comment in due course, but I will stand by him. As long as he is leader of the Conservative Party, I stand by him, and so does a very large majority of the Conservative Party.
Do you think there will be quite a lot of people wanting him to stay on, to give perhaps more time for people to jockey for position for a proper leadership contest?
Well, I think there is certainly a strong case for cool and considered reflection in the Conservative Party, for taking some time to learn the lessons of what has happened over the last 24 hours. Now, we will all have to consider what the best way to achieve that is, but we need some cool reflection and not any decisions made in a hurry.
well, perhaps not decisions made in a hurry, but there are a number of people who obviously are being thought of as leadership contenders, and you are one. Is it something that you are planning to do, to put your hat in the ring if a leadership election's called?
I'm not making any plans at the moment. My plans at the moment extend to winning my seat here in Richmond, where we are at the count. And until we've had the result of that, I'm not in a position to make any plans of any kind. So my plan is to see this count through to a successful conclusion and to support John Major in the coming weeks and months.
Do you think he is going to come under a great deal of pressure, perhaps to go and go quickly?
Well, I don't know. As I say, I think this is something for him to comment on later. I support him as leader of the Conservative Party, and I will energetically continue to do so.
Which other people do you think are most likely to perhaps be trying to angle for his job?
I have no idea. I think we all have to take stock of the very heavy defeat that we have suffered. We all have to think about the lessons that can be learned from that, and it is too early to say at the moment, in terms of personalities, what the party should do about it.
But won't new leadership perhaps be the first step on the road to recovery for your party?
I think the first step is to provide an effective opposition in the House of Commons from day one, and to have cool and considered reflection, as I have said, not to rush into making any decisions about the future of the party. And so I hope we will take our time over all these matters.
William Hague, thank you very much indeed.
Sue, thank you very much. There are a lot of curious expressions creeping into the vocabulary, like take stock and regroup, which the Tories are using today as they try to absorb the scale of their defeat. Not quite clear what they mean. I suspect Mr. Hague means don't have a leadership election too soon, because if I am to run, I need a bit of time to sort out my campaign. One of the things that Labour was intent on doing was getting more women into Parliament. Barbara Follett, for instance, with their Emily's list, trying to get women on, the experiment with the women-only shortlist. And it does look today as though they have succeeded. We have 3 of the successful women candidates joining Jeremy in just a moment. But before we talk to them, Peter, what's the scale of the success of this operation to bring more women into the House?
Oh, yet another record broken, David. You talk about regrouping. I mean, the regrouping on the regrouping of the gender balance on the House of Commons is going to be really quite dramatic. Here we have now a picture of the old House of Commons, the last House of Commons, in which we had the most women MPs in history. Here it was. We had Labour with clocking up there to something like 39, and we had the Tories on 18. Now, what's happened in this election? What has this election done to those totals? 39 Labour, remember, clocking up now to not twice that, but something like, well, really 3 times that, 59 more Labour women MPs. The Tories, understandably, down 6. The net effect of it all, when you add in the New Liberal Democrats and the SNP and so on, 118 women MPs, 55 more than there were before. So double the number of women MPs, Jeremy.
Peter, well, as you say, 3 of those new Labour women MPs are with us now. How is the House of Commons going to change, Angela Smith, with this influx of women?
I think some of the male MPs have been a bit of a surprise. One male MP said to me shortly before recess, "We know it's right, we want more women here, but it's a bit of a culture shock. It will take some getting used to."
Lorna Fitzsimons, do you think that Labour ought to change the law in order that all women shortlists be made legal?
No, I mean, what we did was we achieved what we wanted to do, which was a vast increase in the amount of women candidates and therefore women MPs that the Labour Party put forward. We have actually achieved that.
But you're not in favour of it being made legal?
Well, it's that the case law is now our standing that it is illegal because it is considered to be in...
Well, that's kind of I'm all right Jill, isn't it?
No, it's not, no.
Well, you're nowhere near 50%.
No, the Labour Party went into all women shortlists, realising that we had to kick-start the system. It wasn't a perfect way of doing it, as we found out to our cost, but what it did do was made both the Labour Party and also other political parties take women seriously.
Right. I mean, one of the things that intrigues this phenomenon of new women in New Labour, Claire Ward, is have you ever had a proper job?
Of course. And perhaps
Well, you're 24?
I'm 24, yes.
And all your life has been politics, hasn't it?
A large part of my life, my interest has been politics. But I'm actually qualifying as a solicitor.
Qualifying?
Qualifying.
But isn't it a characteristic of all of you that you are essentially professional politicians with no other life?
Oh, no, I have lots of other life.
It's a boys' game, Jeremy. The reality is that the Parliament has been dominated by people that have been, on the whole, over 50. Now, the reality is that the people of this country, and certainly women, feel totally and utterly excluded from that. They've not exactly shown that they're good at making decisions on our behalf, and therefore it's about time Parliament was more representative. Now,
in what way is a monomaniac younger woman more representative than an older man?
You're portraying us all as somehow these boring politicians that have jumped up the ladder. Many of these new women MPs have so much experience in all walks of life. They're going to bring something new to the House of Commons.
All right.
And all of us, when we've been canvassing and talking to people on the doorstep,
which one of you three was not either an NUS or a Labour student activist?
Me.
Oh, two of you. That's very good.
Does that exclude us, though, Jeremy? Does that exclude us as women in the decision-making process?
Not at all, but it's just, we're just trying to get a handle on what this phenomenon of new Labour women is.
I mean, the reality is that we have decided that the political process was something that we wanted to be involved in to achieve change. Now, are you saying that therefore just because I haven't had, say, a job in a factory or whatever, which actually I have had, that therefore I am not legitimate in terms of a candidate or an MP to represent people in my constituency in Rochdale?
What you've got to remember is
what is legitimate in terms of the criteria?
All of us have been members of the Labour Party and active in politics for quite a long time, and therefore our experience extends long before the current trends or interests.
Sure, all right, okay.
For 8 years, a number of our new MPs have been councillors. That's tremendous experience for going to the House of Commons.
I won't tease you anymore about that. But I mean,
you were enjoying yourself, weren't you?
You won this great talisman seat, Basildon. Now, yet we see Essex County Council. This ongoing dispute with the firemen because it can't meet their aspirations.
Because the government have cut the money.
Yeah, okay, but you're the government now.
We weren't when the money was decided, were we?
But you're the government now.
Yeah, we'll have to sort it out, and the county council will have to sort this out with the fire service. But let's look at one thing straight on the fire service. I spent 7 years on the fire committee. The county council was spending £3.5 million more than the government.
But the point is, what I'm trying to get at is you've accepted the freezes that the Tories have built in to government spending predictions. You are going to have a huge crisis here of trying to make ends meet, aren't you?
We don't underestimate the challenges ahead of us.
That's guff.
No, it's not. It's not. We recognise how difficult and how serious things are, and we've got to deal with these. But you've got to deal with them appropriately in a proper manner.
Claire?
Well, I'm quite confident that we will actually be able to deal with that. One of the problems...
But how?
Well, because first of all, we'll be sitting down with the parties involved and trying to deal with the issues.
I think the one thing, it's got to be said, Jeremy, that although cash is definitely needed in the system, the reality is that you've got to look how you spend the money currently. Now, you can't say, for example, that the Labour pledge on the health service actually is, in terms of looking at how we spend the money, redirecting it from the internal market onto patient care and therefore treating 100,000 more patients. Is not a good way of actually dealing with the current spending commitment of the government.
But hang on, you beat Liz Lynn in Rochdale because you were actually more right-wing than her and promised to spend less.
No, that's not true at all, actually. If you actually look at the reality, the people of Rochdale were sick and tired of being represented by an opposition MP for 25 years that actually couldn't do anything for the health service in Rochdale. And we've got to the point where, with a Liberal MP, we're in danger of losing our local hospital. That's why they voted Labour.
All right, okay, well, I will look forward to meeting you many times in the future. Congratulations to you all. David.
Richmond Crescent in Islington, Tony Blair's home, and flowers have been arriving there this morning, congratulating him on his victory. Flowers that now have to be meticulously searched, or maybe he just enjoys the smell of fresh flowers on a May morning. And they're carried down the street there. Now, the state of the parties, more serious business. 629 results in, 30 still to come, 417 for Labour, up 145, Conservatives 160, down 174, Liberal Democrats on 41, up 25, Nationalists on 10, up 3, others up 1. And William Hague, the Welsh Secretary, speaking on this programme a moment ago, I support John Major as leader of the Conservative Party and will energetically continue to do so, playing his cards close to his chest. David Evans, well, in Hatfield, we need a new leader with some enthusiasm for setting out Conservative policies, and that should be John Redwood. And Peter Mandelson, Labour's campaign manager, considering what his party has done to him, John Major has emerged a dignified leader. Well, Tony Howard, he obviously has behaved in a very dignified way. He hasn't yet given any indication of what he's going to do. He talked about rebuilding the party early this morning when he arrived back in Smith Square. What's your bet that the pressure will be on him to do, and how much will it be his decision, and how much will he be lent on by people in the party wanting a kind of, at least an orderly bloodletting rather than a vulgar bloodletting?
Well, it'll be his decision whether he sort of quits straight away. I think that's entirely up to him. But there has to be, doesn't there, or the election will take place not more than 6 months, not less than 3 months after the new parliament resumes. So there is a possibility of an election there where someone could run against him. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see a lot more of these embarrassed statements saying, you know, the Prime Minister enjoys my full support, but the party leader enjoys my full support as long as he's leader of the Conservative Party. These are very double-edged statements. I remember going to a garden fete once in 1963, I think. Randolph Churchill yelled out at Rab Butler, he did, yelled out, "Are you loyal to your leader?" And Rab rather unwisely said, "I have made it clear Mr. Macmillan will have my full support so long as he remains Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party," which says absolutely nothing. Yes. And that's rather the echoes that we're getting today. I don't know. I mean, I think John Major really will feel eventually that he wants to walk away. I think that Norma will say, "Look, John, you've had enough of this. They've treated you appallingly. Come on." And if you're John Major's age, if you want to start a new career, he better start it now. You know, it wouldn't be much good quitting when you were 59 or something like that, but it's the right age to pick up directorships and that kind of thing. I don't think he'll go suddenly. I don't think he'll throw down his bat and won't go off in a sulk. My guess is he'll not be leader of the Conservative Party come July.
The vote, the MP is interesting. We've done a check on the Tory MPs elected, so far the 160, 170 or so, and it does look as if it's absolutely evenly split between those who declared themselves Eurosceptic in their manifestos and those who didn't declare themselves. Whether that lasts, I mean, whether some of them did it for cosmetic reasons, I don't know, but it does suggest the party is completely riven on this issue.
I think smaller Conservative
50-50.
I think the smaller Conservative Party probably, though I'm slightly conjecture land, it probably helps the pro-European, or the non-Eurosceptics. If the Tory party had come back with many more MPs, I think the Eurosceptics would have been stronger in it proportionately.
Tony King, what do you think the future holds for that party?
Always bear in mind that John Major's great strength as leader of the Conservative Party is that he's been that leader that divides the Conservative Party least. And either John Major is going to stick around for a while, or almost certainly precisely because of the balance you've just described, the Conservatives are going to want somebody who's rather like John Major in the sense of being able to appeal to both wings of the party. Incidentally, it's worth pointing out that political parties, especially the Tory party, have become much more unforgiving of leaders who lead them to defeat than they used to be. Earlier on, we were seeing the people buried under landslides. Arthur Balfour went on leading the Tory party for years. Stanley Baldwin lost at least 2 elections as Tory party leader, not to mention Winston Churchill, who was overwhelmed in 1945 and stayed on to become Prime Minister 6 years later. These days we're much tougher, much fussier, and we make people go if they lose more than once or twice.
The European issue will be an interesting one, which we're bound to hear a lot of. Of course, you could argue, I suppose, that the Tory party needn't actually take up any positions for the time being, even on the leadership, until it sees what's going to happen on the single currency, because it's now in Tony Blair's hands to go to the Amsterdam conference and take part in the discussions on a single currency, and in a way, perhaps until forced to, the party needn't make up its mind. Maybe that's an argument for them keeping John Major for the time being. Jeremy.
Thank you, David. Well, I'm joined now by 2 prominent Conservatives, Alan Duncan and Stephen Dorrell. Mr. Dorrell, do you take the view that it is possible for you now not to strike an attitude on the single currency?
I think that after an election campaign like this, the very worst way of making policy is, after having had no sleep, to be on a podium barely 12 hours after the polls closed, trying to evolve policy. I set out the party's position through the election campaign because I felt it was the right one. What we now need to do is to consider, looking to the future, how to rebuild the Tory constituency in the country on Europe, but on a very wide range of other issues as well.
It's only 6 weeks to the Amsterdam summit. I'm rather tempted to ask why you're standing on the podium then.
Well, because if you want to ask me about the Amsterdam summit, I can tell you precisely the attitude that I think Britain should strike there. Of course, the single currency isn't an issue that's directly concerned with the Amsterdam summit, which is concerned with the IGC that's been going on now for more than 12 months, where Mr. Blair has proposed a significant, that he made it clear he would consider amending treaty powers to extend qualified majority voting in a way that the Conservative Party in the election campaign made it clear we would not. And certainly if Mr. Blair came back from Amsterdam having agreed to a significant extension of qualified majority voting, that is an issue on which he would be held to account by the entire Conservative Party in the House of Commons, and I believe by the British people outside the House of Commons.
All right, well, we'll ignore the splits in your own party just for a second while we look at this.
You wouldn't find many splits in the Conservative Party on that issue that you raised and I just dealt with.
All right. Alan Duncan, what is the time frame that you think the party ought to be looking at now in terms of trying to sort itself out? Is it a business that needs to be addressed urgently?
No, I think we should take, as it were, time out for cool reflection. And we're not in a hurry. We don't need to be in a hurry. It's quite clear what our predicament is. And bear in mind that there are a number of new members of Parliament on the Conservative benches who are not familiar with the House of Commons or with potential candidates. Bear in mind, too, that the National Union is, that's the voluntary authority within the party, is considering changing the rules. I happen to think in a rather cockeyed way, but I think we at least owe our activists the courtesy of some kind of consultation. So I don't think there's any particular rush or need to rush on the question of leadership. And I think, as Macmillan said, cool, calm deliberation disentangles every knot.
But given the size of the Labour majority, you may well be looking at a 2- or 3-term Labour government now, mightn't you?
How on earth can you say that? I mean, I think this is a one-term government. I think
Are you being serious?
I think the boomerang from this government is going to be absolutely massive. I mean, one only needs to look at the interview you've just had with some of those who've just been elected to realise that their political sophistication is not very great. There are a lot of people there who
Go on, patronise them a bit more. They're all listening.
Well, no. Well, you're actually the best at it. I'm learning at your feet on this. I think there are a lot of people who are very surprised to be in the House of Commons. And I think, in a way, everyone's surprised by this outcome. I think we're surprised at the scale of the defeat. The Labour Party is surprised at the scale of the victory. And it may be that a lot of people who voted, or perhaps did not vote, are surprised at actually what's happened as well.
Right. Stephen Dorrell, do you think this government's going to be a one-term wonder? We're going to go see another fantastic upheaval in 5 years' time?
Well, I agree with Alan Duncan that the objective of the Conservative Party, every single elected Conservative MP and the people who support the Conservative Party outside Parliament, the objective of every one of us during the lifetime of this new Parliament must be to rebuild the Conservative coalition, because I believe the Conservative Party is the authentic voice of the centre-right in Britain, and that represents the majority view of the British people. So I certainly agree with Alan's objective, that is to say that Mr. Blair should be held to account as Prime Minister in a responsible way through this Parliament, and that the Conservative Party should aim to build itself to a position that we can reclaim our ground in the next general election.
Right, thank you both very much. Just before we go back to David, would any of you like to react to Alan Duncan's patronising of you?
I'm happy to be unsophisticated. It's the unsophisticated women win elections. It's because the electorate want people they know can tell the truth and are honest with them. What counts?
Okay. David Dimbleby.
Thanks, Jeremy. Well, now, Anthony King was a member of the Nolan Committee that was reported to inquire, is a member of the Nolan Committee that was set up by the Prime Minister to inquire into sleaze and improper behaviour in the House of Commons. We've heard a lot about people wanting to get rid of the Tories for one reason or another. We haven't heard this argument today much, or indeed last night, about whether sleaze was a big factor. We did hear, I think, Michael Heseltine saying it was some aspects of the campaign. It was a pity that people were standing. What's your opinion? Do you think it played big with the electorate?
Well, there's no absolute way of proving it, but we mustn't lose sight of the result in Tatton. That was quite extraordinary. Just because we were expecting it doesn't mean that it wasn't amazing. Here you have somebody who had never stood for political office before in his life, had no known political views apart from his opposition to corruption, standing against the incumbent Tory who'd been there for years in the 5th safest Conservative seat in the country and defeating him. And on top of all that, I made up, just for my own amusement, a list of MPs who were, to use the phrase you were using last night, under a cloud. to see what happened to them, and it's worth just reporting that almost none of them has held his seat, and that in the majority of cases the swing against them was very large indeed. My hunch is that the Conservative Party did itself even greater damage by allowing its members to behave in the way it did without punishing them.
Well, the Prime Minister would say the electorate failed to find them innocent until they were proved guilty.
The Prime Minister did indeed say things like that. The voters appear to have found most of them guilty.
Okay. Robin Oakley joins us now, BBC's political editor, with the latest hot news from the front. Robin?
Well, I understand that Mr. Blair has had his first conversation with President Clinton since his election success. Apparently President Clinton called him when he was in his car on the way from Stansted Airport to the celebrations at the Festival Hall last night, and said that he'd been following the British general election with great interest and offered his congratulations and looked forward to seeing Mr. Blair soon. I don't know yet whether there was any formal invitation for a meeting, but of course Mr. Blair is due to go to the States for the G7 economic summit of the leading industrialized powers in mid-June, and he's also due to be making a speech at the United Nations shortly after that.
And Robin, how much do you think that campaign really was modelled on President Clinton's successful campaign, when you look back on the campaign?
Oh, I think there's been a strong American influence in all of Labour's campaigning, and Mr. Blair and Gordon Brown and Peter Mandelson have had plenty of transatlantic contacts and have certainly picked up some of the American techniques in the course of doing so.
Okay, what other news?
Well, other news is that we're expecting Mr. Blair this afternoon, as I'm sure you've said already, to confirm top appointments such as Gordon Brown as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Robin Cook as Foreign Secretary. I think the list will include David Blunkett as Education Secretary. Mr. Blair is making a high priority of education. But I think the most interesting thing is that John Prescott will definitely be confirmed as Deputy Prime Minister. But with that rank of Deputy Prime Minister, he will have a departmental role, which I understand is likely to take in the Transport Department and sections of the existing Department of the Environment.
And what's your impression he'll do with those people who are in the shadow cabinet but of the left, or further to the left than he?
I don't have a very definite clue on that as yet, right, David, but we are expecting most of those who are in the shadow cabinet obviously to be confirmed in their positions, but there is this problem he faces of squeezing, as it were, 26 promises into 22 paid places, because there are the 19 elected members of the shadow cabinet to accommodate. There are 2 whom he appointed in opposition to be part of the shadow cabinet. He also promised Derek Foster a cabinet role when he ceased to be chief whip, and he has to accommodate the Lord Chancellor and the Leader of the Lords. So that tops up to 26 names. He's only allowed to put 22 cabinet ministers on the payroll. There's a little bit of a conundrum for him to solve there.
We heard that John Major called Tony Blair yesterday evening or early this morning. Do you know what they said?
Well, I know that Mr. Blair takes the view that the way in which departing prime ministers are, as it were, harried out of Downing Street and have to bundle their belongings into a removal van is unnecessarily hasty and unnecessarily cruel, and I believe he made the offer to Mr. Major saying that, you know, this is all a very crude way of doing things, and if you want to stay on a bit longer, that will be okay by me. But I think Mr. Major didn't take him up on the offer.
Good. Thank you very much, Robin. We'll be back with you during the day if you have more news for us, which I'm sure you will. We join Jeremy Vine now. And Jeremy, what news do you have of the domestic arrangements for today and the plan for going to the Palace and going to number 10?
Well, the latest time we have now, David, for departure from here for the Blairs is noon. So that's when we think they'll be leaving their home in Islington and going to the Palace. It's being pointed out that actually Cherie Blair and the children have not seen inside 10 Downing Street yet. So one of the jobs the Blairs will have today is to actually go into the building and have a look around, and as one of Mr. Blair's colleagues has just been saying, see what the options are there. So the whole business of house moving may be rather more complicated than it is for Mr. Major, who's just got to bundle up his stuff and get out. There's no sign of a removals van here, and it may be that the family decide that they'll be largely based in this house here. Just to tell you, David, as well, that Mr. Blair is currently sitting in discussions with Alistair Campbell, his press secretary, and also with Jonathan Powell, his chief of staff, who's of course the brother of Sir Charles Powell, who's the one of Mrs. Thatcher's chief advisors. Now, Jonathan Powell and Alistair Campbell are likely to be the two staff appointments that are confirmed today, along with the shadow cabinet to cabinet places, those top jobs in the cabinet that Robin was talking about. So those two key jobs for advisors to Mr. Blair, we're likely to hear those names confirmed. There are some other staff jobs for Mr. Blair to appoint as well. They're likely to become clearer in the next 48 hours or so.
It's very English that one of the Powells calls themselves Powell and the brother calls himself Pole. Is that, you meant to say that, didn't you?
I did mean to say it, and as I said it, I just was thinking, as you were, while you were hearing it, that it was very English, but I don't think it's an error. One of them does call himself Powell, and the other one does call himself Pole, and that's rather amusing, I suppose.
Fine Labour Conservative distinction.
Yes, exactly. It's a very sunny morning here, David, and there's a lot of press people here, all waiting for Mr. Blair to come out. He's not actually going to say anything outside the House, incidentally, although microphones are here ready waiting for him, of course, if he wants to. He made 3 speeches last night, all focusing on this one nation theme, which was threaded through everything he said on the campaign trail as he crisscrossed the country on his battle bus. And when he gets to Downing Street, we understand that he will make a very positive mention of John Major, simply to respect and pay credit to his dignity in defeat and the way the two men apparently worked well together when they had to and so on. But the big emphasis behind the scenes here is that Labour are going out of their way not really to say very much about the Conservatives. They feel there's a lot to say and they don't want to say it. They want to talk about what they're going to do and how they're going to move forwards.
Jeremy, thank you very much indeed. And down at Buckingham Palace, a large crowd gathered, whether for 11 o'clock changing of the guard, most probably, or for the changeover with John Major coming here, we shall see. But anyway, that's where John Major will go, going in on the door on the right-hand side here, not through the centre gate there, but over to the right, and sweeping in there round into the courtyard. And at number 10 Downing Street, there's also a small crowd gathered outside in the street, or photographers mainly gathered there. Anyway, we should be down there later on this morning when the Prime Minister goes there to relinquish the seals of office or resign. In the meantime, let's go up to Edinburgh again and join John Nicholson.
Yes, David, I'm in the Scottish Parliament building. As you know, Labour has promised that within the first year they will enact legislation to put into effect a Scottish Parliament, and most people expect that it'll be in this building here, which is a sort of 70s Times capsule converted in 78 by the last Labour government. And I'm joined here by 4 representatives of the different parties who will have to grapple with the issue of constitutional change. And if I can start with David McCletchie, who's the president of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Association. To outsiders, that's basically everyday Conservative members, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, you spent years and years and years resisting devolution. We're sitting in the Scottish Parliament building and you've no MPs at all. Your only chance of getting any representation over the next 4 years in Scotland is if you stand for a Scottish Parliament.
Well, there are elections to local councils and European parliaments before we get to elections for a Scottish Parliament.
Yeah, but we're talking about real legislation, not local government.
Well, that's what the European issue is about at the election. But leaving that aside for the moment, the fundamental point is it is not this general election that decides whether there's a Scottish Parliament. It's a referendum of the Scottish people which will decide whether or not there is a Scottish Parliament. And the issues have to be fairly and squarely put to the Scottish people on the basis of a white paper which the new government will be publishing.
Quite. I mean, Michael Hirst, before he departed, told me that Scottish Conservatives, of course, would stand for a Scottish Parliament if the Scottish Parliament were set up. And of course, no one would seriously consider abolishing the Scottish Parliament once it had been set up. It's a pretty difficult manifesto to run on, isn't it? Vote for us, because we've tried to stop you getting this Parliament for the last 18 years.
No, I don't think that's not going to be the manifesto. The manifesto, if the Scottish people decide there is to be a Scottish Parliament to deal with Scottish domestic issues, then our manifesto will address these issues. As you rightly said, if the people want to have a Parliament, then we will contest seats in that Parliament and play our full part in it.
So no question of stopping it in the Lords?
Certainly not.
Right, so that we can rule that out. Leslie Hines for the Labour Party. I mean, is it good for democracy that there's not a single Conservative in the whole of Scotland?
Well, I welcome it. For the last 18 years, we've in Scotland have had to suffer Conservative rule, and I look forward. I think it's fantastic that we've now got 56 Labour MPs in Scotland, and we've got an endorsement for our policy in Scotland.
Sure, but I mean, it's such a great victory. You can afford to be a little bit magnanimous. I mean, they got 17% of the vote and not a single seat. I mean, that can't be healthy in a democracy.
Well, I think the people decided, the people voted. It's them.
No, the system decided.
No, the people decided, the people voted, and I think there was a feeling that people wanted to get rid of the Conservative, all of the MPs. The feeling certainly in the count last night was we wanted to get rid of Conservatives and we wanted to endorse the Labour Party's policy.
Fiona Hislop of the SNP, I mean, your position's a little bit confusing on this, isn't it, on the Scottish Parliament question. Your leader has said that, of course, you won't resist Scottish Parliament legislation, but you might not back it.
Well, I must say the clock is now ticking for Labour to deliver a devolved assembly. The SNP have always said that we work constructively for the best future for Scotland. If that means cooperating in an assembly in the future, so be it. But we have to have the white paper, we have to have the referendum.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ground to cover before then.
But I mean, let's be serious about this. I mean, after 300 years of not having a parliament, a party that stands for a parliament, that's your raison d'etre, is to get a parliament back to Scotland. You couldn't seriously be in the position in which you abstain on a vote to set up a Scottish parliament.
The issue is the sovereignty of the Scottish people, and we've said in this campaign, and we'll say it again, sovereignty lies with the Scottish people. They will decide.
Yeah, I know all that, but I mean, Alex Salmond's always said that, to borrow a phrase from Tam Dalyell, the setting up of a Scottish parliament will mark the beginning of a slippery slope to independence. It doesn't really matter, does it, what kind of parliament it is? There's a great symbolism in getting Scottish MPs elected in here, and after that, the Scottish people decide how far it goes. That has to be good for you,
There's
surely.
a great anticipation from the Scottish people for Labour to deliver.
Yeah,
I mean, they're the ones that have got the huge majority. They're the ones that are going to have to deliver. The SNP are always going to be here to speak for Scotland. We always will be. And we think that obviously the best use of this building would be for an independent parliament.
Ross Finney, ironically, of course, the Liberal Democrats benefit, don't they, in Scotland, from their not being PR, because you're way overrepresented in Parliament.
Well, that's a rather curious way of putting it. I mean, any party has to play the system as they find it. At the moment, we don't have proportional representation. I very much, and the Liberal Democrats, wish there was. But we are tasked with actually winning seats under the system as it is.
And there will be PR, of course, in the Scottish Parliament.
Yes, indeed. And the fact that we've been very successful really is neither here nor there. I mean, that's what we've done.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
During last night, we were polling not just to find out how people had voted that day, giving us our accurate exit poll, but also talking to them about why they voted the way they did, analysing what their reasons were, and as a result have now been able, Peter, to draw up a sort of analysis of what people want from this new Labour government. I don't know how exact it will be, but what is it showing you?
Well, some quite interesting things, really. I mean, clearly huge negative reasons for leaving the Tories, divided party, weakly led and all that kind of thing. On the other hand, 85% of those people we talked to said they thought Labour would make things better. So there is a huge positive vote for Labour, as well as sort of despairing vote saying, the Tories have had it, let's try somebody else. First thing, I think, to make clear is that there is no question that Labour's bid to win the middle class has really paid off. I mean, here's the swing in working class seats, traditional Labour seats, a 9% swing, a hefty swing to Labour there. But in the middle class seats, which of course are where the marginal seats are and where the great middle England swathe around London, for example, is that Labour have done so well in, a 12% swing to Labour. But it's not as if people are necessarily asking Labour to reject traditional socialist policies. I mean, look here. Should government redistribute wealth? Now, you might have thought, with Labour saying, don't worry, no increase in income tax rates and so on, you might have thought everybody would say, well, no, we don't want any of that. But that's not happening. Take old Labour voters first. By old Labour voters, I mean the voters who were Labour in 1992. 79% of them think that the government should redistribute wealth. You might not think that's very surprising, but the people have switched to Labour. The new Labour voters, 60% of them, nearly two-thirds of them, agree that the Labour government should redistribute wealth. So, Labour Party, we're joining, don't go and abandon all those ideas of taxing people who are richer. Secondly, privatisation. We had this fascinating way in which Tony Blair appeared at the very beginning of the campaign to accept railway privatisation would go ahead. Should government privatise more? Should a Labour government privatise more? Well, perhaps not that surprisingly, but on the other hand, 90% of 1992 Labour voters, no, they shouldn't privatise more. But again, of the switchers, there you have only 15% of the switchers, a lot of middle-class people moving to Labour, people perhaps, you might think, saying Labour should now move even further right and to take up the centre-right position. No, they're saying, on the whole, on these issues like privatisation, redistribution, 3/4 of them think that Labour shouldn't privatise more. Don't lose sight of the fact that there's important social responsibilities for a government still to keep going, even if there's a Labour government that has switched partly right. David.
Thanks so much, Peter. That's interesting. We've got a result coming soon from St Ives, we think. But before we go there, Peter Kellner, what do you make of those results? What impact on a new Labour administration of that information, if it's borne out by all their polls, presumably they're polling as well, or focus grouping in their case?
My view is that the public that has voted for Labour is in many ways more radical than Labour's manifesto. The trouble is, Labour made the judgment that even if people said they wanted radical things, more tax for education and health, for example, they were, at the end of the day, reluctant really to pay for it. They wanted radicalism without tears. I think Labour, if it is in for 2 terms, which looks highly plausible, I think we may well see the next election seeing a much more radical manifesto than this one, because they'll be fighting that from government, where they'll be able to have exorcised many of the ghosts that they felt in this election they couldn't exorcise until they'd been in power.
But Peter, the Labour Party doesn't trust your branch of science, which is this investigating what people think. Because if you're right, they would have produced a more radical policy, and indeed there are many people in the Labour Party who think they should have.
There's a case made for that, but what I think the Labour Party have done, I think we know that Tony Blair is in some ways a fan of Margaret Thatcher's tactics, not her overall political philosophy. Remember what Margaret Thatcher did in 1979? She came in on a pragmatic manifesto. It was the second one in 1983, which was radical. The big radical measures, the privatisations and so on, were in the 83 to 87 Parliament. So I think we may see the cautious half of a 2-term government, the more radical half, coming in the early years of the next century.
Okay, Peter, thanks very much. Brian Mawhinney, just arriving in number 10 Downing Street a moment ago. Going to see the Prime Minister keeping a rather sickly grin on his face for the photographers as he goes up. The man who was one of the key members of the campaign team. And I'm now joined by Lord Archer, who didn't give a dinner party last night, I think, Lord Archer.
Yes, I did, David.
You
yes,
did?
I did. You weren't invited, I agree. But
I wouldn't have been expected to be invited. I was working. But was it a big and successful party, or was it a wake?
It was interesting because I had 2 former chairmen there, actually. So obviously when we began to see the results, it was interesting to have people who'd held the highest positions in the party giving their opinion.
And what was their opinion?
Well, it was a disaster, wasn't it? I mean, we can't pretend that this was a wonderful result, but what we've got to do is cry for 10 minutes and then get our heads down and get on with it.
Yes, but crying for 10 minutes is one thing, but you must have an inkling what it was that was wrong with the campaign.
I don't think it was so much the campaign. I'm fairly convinced that 18 years was one of the things that did us. That was a really big factor, and as I have said all along, if you go into an election divided, the British people will not back you, and we were divided, and I kept begging the party to get together, and there were elements in it who were not willing to do so.
Do you blame John Major for failing to impose his discipline on them?
How do you impose discipline on a party when you've only got a 1 or 2 majority? It's very simple when you've got 135, as Margaret Thatcher did, and you will see also with Tony Blair that if there's a rebellion of 30 or 40 with a majority of 170, 180, he can say to them, get lost. John Major was never in a position to say that with a 1 or 2 majority. It made individual backbenchers very powerful. No, I certainly do not blame John Major.
Have you spoken to him?
Yes, I do. I was in Downing Street an hour ago and saw him.
And how is he taking this defeat?
Well, I think you'd have to agree that his speech last night, both at Huntingdon and back at Central Office, was that of a very dignified loser. And I think it was a great credit to him that we saw him as we've always seen him, as a thoroughly decent man, behaving in a way you would expect him to, even in defeat. So he has taken it. I would say he's obviously shocked by the size. Who wouldn't be? But I think he is aware of what's happened. He's had 6.5 years as Prime Minister in an 18-year administration when we've changed this country, and for that he deserves great credit.
He was, during the campaign, rather like a prize fighter, bashing away, even when other people were falling about exhausted, and one felt at the end he'd have to be seized by somebody and told to stop fighting, it's all over, because he was determined to go right through to the end.
I presume you admire that. I mean, I admired the fact that he just never gave up, and indeed, many people commented that the interview with you was particularly tough, and that he behaved once again with great dignity.
Would you expect him to give up fairly quickly? Do you think he should stay?
There are a group of us who do not want him to go quickly. He is the leader of our party. He has been the Prime Minister. We need some experience on that front bench, having lost 4 or 5 really able front benchers. And indeed, when Mr. Blair is Prime Minister Blair, as he will be in a couple of hours, we need someone on Prime Minister's questions, harrying him, making sure he's up to it. We should take a little time before we jump in and choose someone to take his place.
So are you saying that the party will ask him to stay there, whatever he feels, in order to make an easier transition? Or are you saying that he could actually stay right through till the next election? You seem to be ruling that out.
I think he wouldn't consider staying to the next election. He's never suggested to me, or I think to anyone else, that is what he wanted to do. But we are pushing him to stay because he's the leader of our party. He's the right man to continue leading our party with this problem we are now facing. And we certainly don't want an immediate election in the next few days and then discover in a year's time we've chosen the wrong person.
Has he said to you, I don't intend to stay as leader?
No, he has not, but he did make it absolutely clear yesterday that if we lost, the whole thing would have to be seriously reconsidered, and I don't think it's any great secret that he doesn't want to go on to the next election. My whole point is we don't need a new leader by next week. I keep reminding people that Tony Blair's only led the Labour Party for a couple of years. He followed John Smith. There's no need for us to rush in. We should take our time, see who is good on the front bench in opposition, consider them, vote for them in a considered way, and then go into the summer holiday, go to the party conference perhaps with a new leader, and then come back into Parliament with a new leader. We certainly don't want the Prime Minister to go quickly.
And who do you think would be able to unite a party which, on the calculus we've done, is pretty much evenly split on this greatest issue facing the nation, as the Prime Minister called it, of the single currency? Well, I mean, pretty much evenly split.
Yes, I accept your calculation. I don't know if it's accurate, but I accept it. I must say to you that I was 100% supporter of Margaret Thatcher. I'm 100% supporter of John Major. I remain a supporter of John Major, and I shall not be exercising my time or energy working out who the next leader will be.
Okay, Tony King, you've been listening to all this talk about the leadership and Geoffrey Archer's views on it. What do you think the Tory party should do?
Well,
as an outsider looking in.
Well, I hold the conventional view that the Conservatives should say nothing, should go away and think. One of the times when politicians are at their absolute worst in all parties at all times is immediately after election defeats. They should shut up.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's go down to St Ives, where we have a declaration imminent.
Good morning, David. It's Denise Mahoney here. The candidates are assembled, and the returning officer, Mr Hoskins, has just informed the agents and the candidates of the result, and it looks like the Conservatives have lost here. Very sad news for them, but the Liberal Democrats are already celebrating at the back of the hall. Just holding on here, the winning Liberal Democrat candidate looking quite pensive as he considers his 5 years ahead, and Mr Hoskins is just approaching the microphones now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the result for you. Parliamentary election, St Ives constituency. Date of poll, 1st of May 1997. I, the undersigned, being the acting returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Faulkner Michael Patrick,
Referendum Party,
3,714. Fegan Christopher,
Labour Party,
8,184. Garnier Patricia Elizabeth,
UK Independence Party,
567. George Andrew Henry, 23,966. Hitchins William James, a.k.a. Nirdosh Uday, a.k.a. Axoka, 71. Lipiat Kevin John, 178. Rogers William James Gerald, 16,796. Stevens Frederick Graham, 425. And that the undermentioned person has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency, Andrew Henry George.
The first result of this morning then, a Liberal Democrat gain, their 28th gain of this election, bringing them up to 42 seats in the new House of Commons. Conservatives pushed into second place, and Labour in third place, their vote pretty much staying the same proportionately as it was last time. So the Liberal Democrats take St Ives. And on that note, we go away for the news. We'll be back shortly. I hope you'll stay with us and join us on this dramatic day as we wait for John Major to go to the Palace and then Tony Blair to go and be appointed Prime Minister.
Missile in the air, missile in the air.
BBC Radio News. An American F-16 jet has been shot down.
A dramatic reconstruction of the rescue that stunned the world.
An astonishing story indeed.
Shot down over Bosnia.
Immediately I'm engulfed in flames.
Lost behind enemy lines.
There were no safe areas, no friendlies. I was alone.
One man's fight for survival.
I just prayed, dear God, don't let me die.
A 999 special missing in action Tuesday at 9:30 on BBC One.
This is BBC One. Now the news with Jill Dando.
Good morning.